This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Israel and Palestine violence escalates as dozens are killed in ongoing clashes. Uganda to send its military to fight militants in eastern DRC. And we look at how Muslims in Africa are celebrating Eid amid COVID-19 restrictions. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In your business news, businesses in Nigeria decry the high cost of construction as the price of cement keeps rising. And in sport, Chelsea suffers setback in race for Champions League places after a 1-0 loss to Arsenal. We begin with the escalating crisis in the Middle East as Israel continues to pound the Gaza Strip in response to a series of rocket attacks from the area. Israeli forces are reportedly preparing a ground attack. More than 70 Palestinians and at least 7 Israelis have been killed since Monday. Israel's latest attacks on Gaza come as Palestinians celebrate the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. In Israel, violence has erupted between some Jewish Israelis and Palestinian citizens in several cities. Let's now take a look at something else that the Israeli Prime Minister had said. He promised a crackdown to combat unrest gripping the country. Here's what he had to say.
We are continuing our efforts to stop the anarchy and restore governance to the cities of Israel, with an iron fist if needed, with all forces needed and all authorities required.
Well, let's now bring our attention to the continent, where the Ugandan army is set for a joint military offensive with the DRC in that country's volatile eastern region. The operation aims to combat rebels who have killed hundreds of people in the last year. According to DRC, the Ugandan military officials arrived in North Kivu on Sunday to establish a coordination center for the two armies. In May, the DRC introduced the martial law in the North Kivu and Ituri provinces. This is in a bid to address the increased violence along its border with Uganda. Well, Chris Achamrenga now joins us from Kinshasa with more on this story. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us. Chris, what more details do you have for us about this agreement? And also, can you speak to us about when Ugandan forces are expected to join their Congo counterparts?
Well, Hannah, the Congolese Ministry of Information has confirmed that there's going to be a joint coordination mechanism between the UPDF, the Uganda People's Defense Forces, and the Congolese Army to flush out the Allied Democratic Forces. This is an Islamist group that's originally from Uganda. We have the Ministry of Communication declined to reveal more details. They said the number of the forces from Uganda that will be coming here is classified information. They said they cannot reveal that to the public right now because they fear it could jeopardize the operations that will be carried out there. Now, we spoke to some people in Beni who said that the troops are already in the DRC. They arrived here on Sunday with the UPDF's Chief of Land Forces, who's overseeing this joint coordination center that will be established to wipe out the Allied Democratic Forces that is accused of killing more than 300 civilians in eastern DRC. Now, this comes amid an ongoing state of siege, a martial law that the DRC president imposed, where there's a restriction of the movement of people, and the police and security officers can arrest people without charge, people they suspect of either collaborating with the rebels or engaging in rebel activities. Now, we also tried to talk to some Ugandan officials about, how long this operation is going to take place. They declined to state exactly how long it will take place, but there are also some Congolese officials who have expressed a lot of joy about the Ugandan troops being deployed in the DRC, but there are very many other Congolese who are very unhappy. They're saying Uganda is one of the one of the countries that has caused them trouble because of the history. Hannah, in 1994, after the Rwandan genocide, the president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, and his Rwandan counterpart sent troops to the DRC to fight against the soldiers who were in Rwanda, the ethnic Hutus. And you know, there was a lot of killing of civilians. Very many people, Congolese, died. There was a lot of looting of minerals, timber, and actually there's a court case at the International Court of Justice right now that's supposed to determine the amount of reparations, compensation that Uganda should pay the DRC because of looting. So there's a number of Congolese people who are just wondering why the president allowed to bring in the Ugandan troops that have a bad record in this country. That is what we have gathered so far, Hannah.
Chris, well, even on the back of that, efforts to defeat militia have so far been unsuccessful. On the back of what you've just shared with us, with all that history, how significant is this latest announcement?
Well, for starters, Uganda has a formidable force. I mean, they have been engaging in a number of peacekeeping operations in Somalia and other countries, and they have had a good track record according to the international community and some of the neighboring countries. And so the president of Uganda has an interest in seeing a peaceful Eastern DRC. And he said that the Allied Democratic Forces is a militia group that originated from his country, and so this is part of his problem. So he also wants to see an end of the violence in Eastern DRC, because the east of the DRC and Uganda have been doing a lot of trade. Millions of dollars have been going through to Uganda from the east of the DRC, and he actually has a plan of constructing roads from Uganda to Eastern DRC, but because of the rebel activity, it hasn't been possible. A lot of money has been lost because business has been disrupted in that area. So people are just waiting to see. It's still early days to say to determine how successful this operation is going to be, but certainly there's going to be a change in the way things are going, because the Congolese officials have decided that this time they have to end this conflict. The UN peacekeeping mission is also supporting them with logistics, and now Uganda is coming here. We've also heard that the Kenyan troops will also be coming to support this. So there's definitely a lot of synergy from these regional partners. Hannah?
Let's do hope that it's going to have the positive effects that are hoped. Thank you so much for that, Chris Ochamaringa, speaking to us from the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. Let's head over to India now, which has reported over 360,000 new cases and over 4,100 new deaths. A day earlier, it had reported a record high of 4,200 deaths. The country's death toll now tops 250,000. The World Health Organization says a COVID-19 variant identified first in India has been found in 44 countries, with a possible presence in 5 more. The UK has the second highest number of cases related to that variant. Well, Muslims around the world will be celebrating Eid ul-Fitr, one of the holiest occasions in the Islamic calendar. Some countries have, however, imposed new restrictions during the holiday to limit the spread of COVID-19. In Egypt, the government has ordered shops to close by 9 p.m. until May the 21st. The move aims to limit crowds and social gatherings, making this year's celebrations very different to those in years prior to 2020. Meanwhile, Tunisia has imposed curfew and movement restrictions until May the 16th. The government there has ordered mosques, markets, and non-essential shops to close. Gatherings and family or cultural celebrations have also been banned. Elsewhere, the Nigerian government has declared phase 4 of movement restriction across the country. A curfew has also been reintroduced with the aim of curbing the spread of new COVID-19 variants. The Nigerian government insists that official engagements, meetings, and conferences should continue to be held virtually. Let's now stay with that story, and for more, we're now joined by our correspondents Deji Badmus in Lagos, Nigeria, and Yasser Hakim, who's in Cairo, Egypt, for us. Thank you so much to you both for joining us. Let's start with you, Deji, in Lagos. Nigeria has reimposed a midnight to 4 a.m. curfew and reduced gatherings for religious groups. Deji, what impact is this having on Eid celebrations there?
Well, first of all, Hannah, let me explain something. Essentially, the country did not actually reintroduce any measures or introduce any new measures at all. What the government did was essentially to re-emphasize that those measures are still in place. As a matter of fact, the curfew from midnight now to 4 a.m. has always been in place. The problem is that a lot of people had forgotten, and I think in some cases there had not been enforcement, if you like. And so that's the reason why the government had to come out now to re-emphasize it and to make it clear that the curfew is still in place. So there's actually no additional new measure now that the government has introduced. All the measures are measures that had always been in place, but the government had to come out to do it. And part of the reason also could be because of the Eid celebration, because the announcement was made 2 days ago. And the government, of course, knows that during the Eid, people will be going to mosque to pray and all of that, just to ensure that people maintain the protocol. So, for instance, today we've gone to some mosque where we saw, social distancing now being observed. The number of people allowed to come into the mosque, of course, cut down. And it's essentially what the government intended to achieve when it made that announcement. So the measures have not in any way affected the Eid celebration. Everything has gone on, very fine so far. And people are actually observing, and the authorities now in the various mosques are ensuring that people observe the COVID-19 protocols in place.
Thanks for that, Deji. I'll be back with you in a moment. Hi, Yasser. Let's come to you in Cairo. Yasser, new anti-COVID guidelines in Egypt have banned mass celebrations. Tell us more about this and other restrictions, as well as their effect on this holiday.
Yes, Hannah, the new measures were put in place just 4 or 5 days before the end of the month of Ramadan, because the numbers of cases have increased steadily and fastly during the holy month, and there were fears that with the celebrations of the Eid festivities and the gatherings and everything, then this will even escalate more. The officials are saying we're already in the third wave of the coronavirus now in Egypt, and they want to prevent an escalation of numbers or cases of infections. And this includes, like you said earlier, closing shops, restaurants, malls, cinemas around 9 p.m. local time, and for beaches and mass weddings, weddings and parties, they're banned completely, except weddings can be in the open air. For the Eid prayers, it has been banned to pray outside the mosques, because in Egypt, due to the large number of worshippers in the Eid, they pray outside in the streets. So to avoid the gatherings, they said only inside the mosques, and the prayers obviously will be or has been regulated in a way that social distancing between the worshippers, and also wearing masks and so forth. As for how this will affect the celebrations, because of the heat, summer heat in the last few days, Egyptians would prefer to go out at night rather than during the day and enjoy and celebrate the Eid. And with the curfew, or with the closure, let's say partial closure of the shops and restaurants and all these places, it would prevent them from doing so at night, and therefore many of the Egyptians would prefer to stay at home at that time and try to have an outing during the day. But also they would find that the parks have been closed down, and the beaches, the public beaches, also closed down. Only hotels are allowed to open, restaurants to open their beaches during this partial closure and during the Eid. And that's another thing concerned with tourism, to try to encourage tourists to move and to come to the country. But otherwise, everything is closed, and this will affect a bit the way Egyptians celebrate the Eid.
Thanks for that, Yasser. I'll be back with you in a moment. Deji, let's bring it back to you in Lagos. Nigerian authorities have been stepping up vaccinations, and this is after a slow start to the rollout. What's the latest?
Well, the latest, Hannah, is that the government is now getting ready to start the second round of vaccination. Remember, The country got around close to 4 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine sometime in March, and vaccination started not long after the country received those doses. And the first round of vaccination, of course, has been done. As you know, of course, with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, you have to take 2 jabs. So the first jabs have been given. The government is now putting everything in place. It says the second round of vaccination will begin probably, I think, next week. Yeah, next week. So the second round of vaccination would begin next week. So those who took the first jabs, of course, will be coming back for the second jab now. And the country is also shopping for more vaccine. Everyone is worried. The authorities are worried with what is going on in India because it's affected vaccine supply. As you know, the first set of vaccine that Nigeria got actually came from India, from the Serum Institute of India. So everyone is hoping that the situation in India improves and that production resumes and that export of COVID vaccines now resumes so that Nigeria can have more, because the country is expecting around close to 14 million or so of more vaccines. And don't also forget that the authorities target to vaccinate around 70% of the population between this year and next year in order to achieve herd immunity. But at the moment, with what we have, we've actually not gone far. So the second round of vaccination would begin. More vaccines have still been expected, and the hope is that there's a quick resolution now to the situation in India.
Thanks for that, Deji. Coming back to you, Yasser, how are initial vaccination challenges being addressed in Egypt?
Yes, at the beginning it was a bit slow, the way the rollout has gone, mainly for 2 reasons. First of all, the deliveries were a bit slow, and second, there were not enough centers to take the jab. Right now, the number of centers has increased in the last month and a half by more than triple or quadruple the number of centers for giving the jabs. And there is a more number of vaccines and doses coming into the country. Just last night, we received 1.7 million doses of AstraZeneca. Egypt so far has AstraZeneca and Sinopharm, the China vaccine, and those are the only 2 being administered at the moment. And to try to speed up the process, the government has signed a contract with Sinovac, China Sinovac, to locally produce the vaccine here in Egypt at a rate of about 40 to 60 million a year, and this should start within a month, the production. And also they've signed with the Sputnik 5, the Russian vaccine, also to be locally manufactured here and add millions more as fast as possible. So the government is trying to speed up the process. Right now, the first segment of the site, which is the elderly and the sick, have nearly finished their doses complete. It has opened the door for workers in the tourism industry to also start receiving the doses, tourism and aviation, as well as banks. So the tourism and aviation for the economic purpose of trying to encourage tourists to come to Egypt, banks and other sectors that are dealing directly with customers or clients or citizens to ensure the safety of both sides. So this is the way it's going at the moment, and they're hoping that once the production begins of the Sinopharm and of the Sputnik 5, things would get faster and try to cover the population and then also export to neighboring African countries.
Thank you so much for that, Yasser. Thank you, Deji. Those were our correspondents. Deji Badmo speaking to us from Lagos and Yasser Hakim speaking to us from Cairo. Let's now take a short break and return. More news, including healthcare superheroes. Nurses in South Africa and Uganda lead the fight against COVID-19 despite many challenges.
Africa is a continent of diversity. with varied climates and enchanting geography. And a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria.
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Let's head over to Madagascar now, where severe hunger has hit the nation's southern region, with more than 1 million people in need of urgent food assistance. The situation has forced people to resort to desperate survival measures, such as eating locusts, raw red cactus fruits, or wild leaves. Some are also leaving their villages to reach urban centers where there is food. The World Food Programme says that about 14,000 people are estimated to be in the most needy category according to its ranking system. This number is expected to double over the next lean season. Malnourishment among the under fives is reported to be at alarming levels. It has almost doubled over the last 4 months, from 9 to 16%. Consecutive years of drought and poor rains have hampered food production there. The WFP urgently needs $74 million over the next 6 months to address the situation in southern Madagascar.
The malnutrition rates on average has gone over the past 3 months from 8 to 16% on average in all the districts. But in some districts, it has gone up to 27%. This is alarming, this is life-threatening, and whichever way you look at it, this is starvation happening before our eyes. We cannot allow this to continue. We need to do everything that we can to do that. WFP stands ready and is assisting people with the current available resources we have, which will run out in the next 2 months. We need donations now in order to be able to meet the needs over the next few months.
The International Nurses Day in Cape Town, South Africa was low-key this year compared to other years when nurses held major events to celebrate their profession. This week, small groups of nurses across the city gathered to commemorate the day and reflect on their experiences in the unprecedented past year of COVID-19. Renal.com reports.
The theme for this year's International Nurses Day is Nurses, a Voice to Lead, a theme which could hardly be more appropriate in light of the extraordinary role nurses continue to play on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's been scary out there. It's been scary in the hospitals as well. It's been very exhausting. It's been mentally and physically draining. We've been overburdened, I would say, as we were short-staffed and there was a lot of patients coming in.
And they say the challenges and uncertainty of COVID-19 will not dampen their passion for their calling or their compassion and caring for their patients.
COVID has been challenging the past year, but we diligently came to work with, all we had to do was just, do safety measures, putting on our protective clothing, and we just continue doing what we do best, caring for our patients, irrespective of all the challenges that we had. And yes, we got through it with flying colours.
City of Cape Town officials praised nurses and other healthcare professionals for going beyond the call of duty in spite of the ever-present risk of COVID-19 infection during one of the most difficult times in world history.
You never stop being a nurse, because when you after your 12-hour shift or after your 8-hour shift, you still go home to maybe a sick mother or a sick child. Like the community, we continue doing our duty. So today it is a very proud moment for us, because once a nurse is always a nurse.
Nurses Day 2021, I would say extra special, because after the year we had, the tough year we had, It's a nice day of recognition, and there's absolutely no lockdown for nurses. But we just have to keep on our lamps burning.
Cape Town health officials say they've made progress with the vaccination of over 75% of the city's health staff. And they're encouraging hard-working, dedicated nurses to stay the course ahead of their country's third wave of the coronavirus pandemic.
I will maintain by all means, in my power, the honor and noble tradition of my profession.
Renee Dalcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, staying on the topic of the world marking International Nurses Day, nurses in Uganda are picking themselves up for more than a year of battling COVID-19. The pandemic placed them under unprecedented pressure. And as Leon Sinyanga reports, it's taken a toll on their mental health and the wider healthcare system in their country.
Flavia Namugai goes about her daily rounds. A year ago, she was being pushed to her limit, working on the front line of Uganda's fight against COVID-19.
This was something really new, and no one was really sure of how it spreads, at what rate. It was a disease that just being studied, so there was a lot of fear.
Namugai and her fellow nurses were worried about contracting COVID-19 and about their families too. But she says she sees her profession as a calling, so she had to keep going.
I entered this profession when I loved the profession. I loved nursing. I wanted to be a medical profession at one point. So my nursing career wasn't put to a weighing scale. I didn't think of any one day that I'm going to quit nursing because of COVID.
Nurses like Namugai are relieved there are now fewer COVID patients in hospitals. But with the effort they put in, many feel there needs to be more recognition of their work. Nurses have been described as healthcare superheroes around the world, learning how to fight COVID-19 as the months go by.
We have learned the prevention and how best we can manage COVID. And indeed, after all what we have learned, once we put it in practice, it has worked for us, and that's why COVID has reduced.
Fighting the pandemic comes at a cost though. Some nurses have lost their lives. The working conditions have been tough. The pay is also low. This May, the health workers under the Uganda Nurses and Midwives Union threatened industrial action over a pay dispute.
The most pressing issue is salary increment, salary disparities. If we are graduate nurses, they are graduate doctors, let us all get the same pay. Let our salary also increase so that we can be able to look after our children.
The government has promised funding of up to $130 million for the next financial year. In the meantime, the nurses keep putting in the hours, saving one life at a time. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And now onto the issue of wildlife. Zimbabwe may carry out a mass culling of elephants for the first time since the 1980s. The culling would be a way to reduce the numbers of the jumbos, whose population has exceeded the country's carrying capacity. Farai Mukutuya tells us more.
There are an estimated 100,000 of these lumbering pachyderms in Zimbabwe, 3 times what the country can manage, according to government, which is considering culling to defuse a ticking time bomb.
The challenge really we are facing is that if we don't take any action now or anytime soon, we will be faced with a situation where these animals will die in large numbers because of starvation. So it's something that is of concern to us, because now we have these huge populations which we cannot sustain. And that's where we then say culling has become a viable option now, a real option.
However, some wildlife activists dispute the official figures.
Elephants are free-range animals. They move from one country to the other along the conservation transfrontiers, right? You find that elephant moves from Zimbabwe to South Africa through the Limpopo conservation transfrontier. from Hwange to Botswana through the Kavango-Zambezi Conservation Transfrontier. So what is it that we are calling Zimbabwean animals?
Activists say the Parks and Wildlife Management Authority should not hide behind poor resourcing as an excuse for failing to manage the jumbos.
They should be able to approach the international community for conservation funds. The money is there. What they need is to improve is to be transparent and accountable on how those funds are managed.
Government says adverse reactions to the mooted cull are too hasty.
We have our scientists looking into it so that they then inform us on the specific approaches that we can take if they recommend that we go that route. Our decisions are always scientific. We give the experts room and support for them to then give us advice.
Previously, Zimbabwe has translocated wildlife abroad as a means to lower numbers, but the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, has tightened regulations on the destinations to which it can move animals. That's left the country with limited options to deal with the growing number of jumbos, which are increasingly coming into conflict with human beings. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Time for a short break and return your business news, including businesses in Nigeria decry the high cost of construction as the price of cement keeps rising.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for the business news. China and Tanzania have signed a bilateral economic and technical agreement in Dar es Salaam. Chinese Ambassador Wang Ke and Emmanuel Tutuba, Tanzania's permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance and Planning, signed the deal on behalf of their respective governments on Wednesday. The economic and technical cooperation is worth around $15 million. The grant will be used to implement various development projects to be agreed on by both countries. China and Tanzania have strong economic ties. Footage in its
China will continue to engage in all forms of cooperation of win-win results with Tanzania in various sectors of Tanzania priority, like infrastructure, agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, ICT, health, education, etc. Made good use of the Chinese gratis aid and Chinese concessional loans.
Over in Nigeria, businesses say the cost of construction has soared due to rising cement prices. Lawmakers have criticized the dominance of three large firms in the country's cement industry, saying their price increases are further delaying construction that is critical to economic recovery.
Nigerian lawmakers said the dominance of three large firms was keeping prices high and impeding construction needed to aid the recovery of the economy. Dangote Cement, founded by Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, has 60.6% market share. Lafarge Africa accounts for 21.8%, while Boa Cement has 17.6%. Their dominance stems from a cement import ban that has been in place for most of the last 20 years to develop self-sufficiency in cement production. However, the policy presented challenges over the years. Cement farms raised prices during Nigeria's 2016 recession to counter low sales volumes, and prices have continued to rise.
It has a large effect in what the price of building development will be right now in Nigeria, and it's a lot of problem because already prices are really skyrocketing, but this is due to, there's nothing the developers can do actually, but this is due to the raw materials of the likes of cement and then some other things.
And the direct impact is recorded in reduction in construction by stakeholders.
Because most people that are used to buy, like, let's say 100 bags, when they come, they will look at it and see that their money will not reach up to that 100. They will buy like 40 or 30 bags, you know. And the way market used to move before, because of the price, market don't used to move it now.
Nigeria's high prices are part of a continent-wide trend, and in some cases, sector collaborators have seen cement costs double in price in recent years.
There should be a price control, because from 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, the price is just skyrocketing without no price control, and nobody can tell the manufacturer that this price is beyond the avoidable reach of a common citizen.
The fast way will be to allow import of cement into the country. The slow way will be to invite other cement players, the bigger cement players, who are more efficient with regard to how they run their plants and so on, and who can over time bring prices down.
This is a hard-set equation of market dominance influencing prices, resulting in partially constructed apartments and buildings.
Monopoly or not, I feel that the government, they are still a very big player in regulating some of these things, and they have to come to the table and then make sure that they do what is fair by everybody, and then so that we can have a system that is balanced.
A 2016 World Bank report revealed the final cement prices in Africa are 183% higher on average than world cement prices. A great margin that could hamper Africa's agenda of self-sufficiency and competitive sector growth projections. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Many pensioners in Nigeria have been left penniless as the government struggles to pay their retirement payments. The backlogs are blamed on corruption and inefficient systems in government. That could change, though, as the government now says it has begun cleaning up that system. CGTN's Philly Haza reports from Abuja.
74-year-old Uzoma Ignatius retired after 31 years of civil service in 2005. He needs cataract surgery but lacks the funds to pay for it because he's still owed 5 years arrears from his pension.
The next surgery will be in July. This one cost me over 100,000, and this thing will be the same thing. So I feel if they will help and pay us that, so that I will be able to treat this other one in July.
Millions of pensioners across Nigeria are facing tough times due to non or irregular payment of what they were owed after retiring. The pension industry has been marred by years of corruption and theft by some government officials. According to the Nigerian Pension Reform Tax Team, about $800 million of stolen funds was recovered between 2010 to 2013. Several arrests of corrupt officers have been made, and the government also introduced a new pension program called the Contributory Pension Scheme in 2004.
Unlike previously practiced, the new pension scheme is now a 50-50 arrangement between the government and the pensioners. Workers get to contribute part of their wages while in service as pension, rather than wait for the government alone to fund their pension when they retire.
This has partly taken the burden off the government, and pension experts say the new scheme is also structured better to prevent corruption now that it's a public and private partnership.
The old scheme is exposed to all these forms of corruption because there is no laid out best practices as to how it is managed. But with this tripartite arrangement, where you have the regulator, National Pension Commission, a government agency, you have the pension fund administrators, private entities, and then you have the pension fund custodian. That way, it is foolproof, fully protected from all forms of corruption.
However, as of 2019, over $1 billion of pension funds were still owed by the government, mainly accrued from the old scheme. Experts say until the government pays out its outstanding debt, the problem will linger.
All the years you have worked before the contributory pension scheme in June 2004, all your government is still owing such a person. So until they send that money to your retirement savings account, before your pension fund administrator will now contact you for processing and payments. So you see, that is one of the issues, the ills of the old scheme that has actually snowballed into the contributory pension scheme.
Last month, the government promised to clear all outstanding payments to its retirees by the end of the second quarter in order to phase out the issues from the old pension scheme. That's something that could help the likes of Ignatius improve their standard of living and tell better tales about serving their country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Meanwhile, the South African National Treasury has warned that the country's debt crisis could deepen further and impact service delivery. That's if the government does not cut wasteful expenditure. The government has been struggling for years to stabilize public debt because of the widening gap between tax revenue and spending commitments. Angela Coppola tells us more.
The country's debt for 2020-2021 is around 3.6 trillion rand, and for the current year it's about 4.2 trillion rand, and climbing to 5.3 trillion rand in 2023-24.
So it continues to rise, largely because our interest costs that we pay is higher than our economic growth, which means we don't generate enough tax revenues to pay for the debt service costs. Hence, it continues to accumulate.
Analysts suggest that the government doesn't have a plan to grow the economy.
But if you look at the recovery of the economy, there's nothing new that's coming into the economy from their side over the next couple of years. So actually, unless they spend quite differently from what they have in the past, it would have no positive impact on the economy going forward.
There's been a fair amount of debate on how government can cut its costs to better service its debt levels. Cutting staff in health, policing and education appear to be the first place that government will look.
Which means at the service level delivery point, citizens will encounter fewer service from the government, but also reduced quality because few people cannot provide the same level of quality.
Economists say that the focus for investment should be shifted to the private sector.
Can't rely on government to get the South African economy going again. It's just about making sure that the money is spent on the right areas. If you look at private sector investment, that is where our focus should be, and that is where I think new economic growth would come from. Of course, they need to fix a few things, Eskom being number one.
The state-owned entities and government guarantees have been a drain on the country's budget. That needs to change, as does economic policy.
That's the more durable way to deal with debt, but it requires the economic reforms that are going to lift investment and economic growth.
For sustainable economic growth to happen, it's important that the government gets its debt levels under control. Otherwise, the country is going to be stuck in that quagmire. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, we have an intriguing story coming up for you after the short break. Let's take a look. An ancient burial site in Kenya reveals the emotional life of early humans.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, archaeologists in coastal Kenya have discovered a cave that was a child's burial site over what is reported to be 78,000 years ago. Head of archaeology for Kenya Museums, Dr. Emmanuel Ndiema, says that the cave is the oldest known human burial site. Ndiema also said the discovery of the remains of a child between 2 to 3 years old could reveal that Homo sapiens existed at that time. Mtoto, as the remains have been named, is derived from a Swahili word to mean child. Mtoto was buried in a shallow grave, and on closer examination indicates that it belonged to Homo sapiens similar to today's humans. Tools were also found, including sharp stone points that could have been used as a spear. Antelope species remains also found in the cave show that Mtoto belongs to a hunting and gathering community.
The age of the child is 2 to 3 years. That's what we approximate based on the dental formula, and also, but the specimen, the sediment itself is been dated to 78,000 years, and that actually falls within the time frame of called Homo sapiens, or anatomically modern human beings. So these are people like just you and me. For a very long time, we have only been looking at the technology, the subsistence, the environment, but we are beginning to understand now this, having people having some emotional attachments to the dead, that they can be able to intentionally bury them.
Muslims around the world are celebrating Eid al-Fitr this week, which are the festive few days that follow the holy month of Ramadan. Kak is a sweet that is popular with Muslims during this period. Yasser Hakim takes a look at the festive treat and its origins.
The sugar-coated sweet is the main reward after a month of fasting during Ramadan. Shops prepare for it from early on.
We begin preparations a month before. The first 10 days of Ramadan, we start preparations and buying the ingredients. We then begin production, and in the last 10 days of Ramadan, we start selling the kak for the Eid.
Traditionally, families bake it at home, but now most prefer ready-made deliveries.
We bring flour, the kak flavor and fragrance, ghee and sesame. We mix it thoroughly until it is blended together. We then add water, sugar and yeast and mix it all. When it holds itself and is strong, we make the familiar rounded shape and then heat it in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes.
Kahk dates all the way back to ancient Egyptian times. It's shaped like a sun with its rays because queens used to offer it to the priests as respect for the sun god Ra 4,000 years ago. Later, Egyptian rulers would stuff it with gold coins and hand it out to the poor during Eid. Since then, it has become a tradition to consume it during the Eid holidays. But in the last 2 years, COVID has had its effects on the demand for the popular sweet.
Before the coronavirus, demand was huge. Last year was tough because the curfew was at 5 p.m, so sales dropped. This year sales are a bit better, but we hope it would improve in the future.
But one thing's for sure, it will remain a main component in these annual festivities. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
We have sport headlines coming for you after the short break. Here's what you can expect. Chelsea suffers setback in race for Champions League places after a 1-0 loss to Arsenal.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find